Welcome, seekers of hidden knowledge, to the mystical realm of the occult. Delve into the secrets of the universe as we journey together into the enigmatic world of ancient wisdom. Brought to you by your guide through the shadows of enlightenment, Wisdom Rocker. Uncover the mysteries, unlock the power, and journey with us as we explore the hidden depths within the pages of forgotten scrolls and ancient texts. Prepare to embark on a journey beyond the ordinary, where wisdom transcends time and knowledge is your greatest ally. Welcome to Wisdom Rocker. Prepare to awaken your inner sage. In this video, we will be uncovering the wisdom within the chapters of
The Theosophical Seal, a study for the student and the non-student, by Arthur M. Kuhn, with an introduction by James S. Perkins. This book is dedicated to all searchers for wisdom. 1958. Chapter 5. The Cross. Everything which we said about the square could as truly be said about the cross, although with certain significant differences. Like the square, the numerical value of the cross is 4. The cross divides the circle into 4 equal segments, the day into 4 parts, and the year into 4 seasons. It marks off sidereal space into 4 cardinal points: north, east, south, and west. Like the square, it is definitely linked with the physical universe, and in that sense with time and space. It also types man as a personality within a physical body as distinct from soul or spirit. However, the underlying difference in the philosophy of the square and the cross, it seems to me, lies in the distinction between the static and the dynamic, between finality and infinity. The philosophy of the cross. The square types a universe that is evolving towards a state of perfection, a state, however, which is fixed and final. It represents a creation that is ever in the process of becoming or moving towards a far-off ideal. Religion envisages a goal towards which each one of us, and humanity as a whole, is traveling. Its prophets and seers envision a perfect society which will one day appear on earth, and such expressions as a new heaven and a new earth, the new Jerusalem, etc., have caught the imagination of poet and preacher. This idea of existence is, unless one be an out-and-out materialist, the rational view of things. Even the most pessimistic among us must accept evolution as a progressive movement towards a newer state, although he may deny a goal or a direction. Some perplexing questions puzzle the open mind. Is this goal the end? Is this state of perfection final? Does this utopia, once realized, remain throughout eternity as a blissful state in which struggle, change, or progress is unknown? Does evolution reach a goal, however distant, and then cease forever? We visualize the square as the symbol of an ideal manhood, which is the ultimate goal of the human race. And yet this ideal or prototype, far ahead as it is, contains a sense of finality. Once it is attained, it is finished, complete. The history of the human race becomes a series of tableaux in life's natural museum, each tableau a little nearer to the idea of perfection, which in the progression of time will ultimately be attained. The square, as the symbol of this ideal of perfection, is both its measure and its limitation. Nothing can be beyond perfection, unless by some metamorphosis the nature of the thing be changed, and a new idea of perfection be established. The concept of perfection implies an end or completion. Like the square, the cross is the symbol of the universe, but of a universe in which God is immanent in every star and every atom. It is the symbol of man, both collectively as humanity and individually as a personality, yet of man within whose body is buried a fragment of deity. The cross is particularly the symbol of the form side of nature, but it is also the symbol of the life imprisoned within that form. This distinction can be graphically illustrated by making a simple little drawing. First, we draw a square. Now, assuming this square to be a cube, we proceed to open it up as one would a cardboard box. We draw a square above the first one to represent the top of the box. Then we trace a square on each side of the original one. These will be the sides opened out. Finally, we spread out the front and the bottom by placing 2 squares beneath the central one. What we now have is the cube unfolded in the form of a Latin cross, symbol of the form unfolded to release the imprisoned life, symbol also of man unfolding his inherent divine nature. Here is the distinctive philosophy of the symbol of the cross. It represents a universe which is dynamic, continually expanding under the pressure of the life force within it. It types not only an ideal or goal of perfection towards which man and the universe is evolving, but an ideal or goal which is itself ever expanding, ever moving in unending spirals throughout infinity. This idea of endless continuity of life is as difficult for the finite mind to grasp as it is to conceive of the known universe to be in a state of infinite expansion throughout an eternity of time. In this thought we approach the very heart and source of being. That an eternal process of motion or of evolution and unfoldment is taking place in man, in the race, and in the universe is a philosophy which must fill the mind with awe and wonder. We grasp at an ultimate goal, but where is an ultimate and fixed goal in a universe which is infinite? For every goal which the mind can conceive is but the starting place from which we look to a new goal. It is said that we are becoming what we are, yet that very state of being which is what we are is also becoming something infinitely more than our highest conception of what we shall be. For this reason the cross is a dual symbol of sacrifice and death, for it embodies the idea of life or spirit as imprisoned or buried in the tomb of matter. It is the symbol of the divine incarnation, of God descending to earth and becoming man. It is no less the symbol of hope and life, for it is the symbol of the resurrection of life from its material bondage. It suggests humanity being raised to divinity. Through it, spirit is ever expanding, ever becoming free. From its center of being, as typed by the rose and the cross, life flows out along its four arms into infinity. There are, of course, many types of the cross. The Greek or Hermetic cross with its four equal arms is perhaps the most ancient. Primitive peoples, observing the sun as it ascends from the winter solstice, crossing the equator to its northernmost point at the summer solstice, then retracing its path, saw that it formed in the heavens a cosmic cross, its four arms marking off the four quarters of the known universe, its vertical line reaching north and south, its horizontal line stretching east and west to the far-flung limits of the universe. A variant of this is the St. Andrew's cross with arms crossing diagonally. It is the union of these two crosses placed one upon the other which forms the British Union Jack. It is interesting also to note that these two crosses are used in mathematics as the addition and the multiplication signs. Several variants of the cross have been used in heraldry, and in ecclesiastical insignia, the Patti cross. A is formed as within a circle something like the meridians and parallels upon the earth. Akin to this is the Maltese cross. B, which consists of four triangles set with points together forming a square. Perhaps the cross most commonly used in this connection is the cross fleury, or fleur-de-lis. C, so called from the fact that each arm is divided at the end into three pointed segments resembling the petals of a flower. This cross refers especially to the third logos in Christian nomenclature, the Holy Ghost, or the third person, and represents the threefold power of spirit flowing out into a fourfold universe. This particular cross is most commonly found embroidered upon tapestries and ecclesiastical vestments, carvings upon church furniture, interior and window decorations, and over cathedral doors. This form of the cross calls to mind its universal, that is, Catholic or cosmic significance. Other forms of the cross are the swastika, E, and the tan. Each of which carries a message distinctively its own, and since each of these crosses forms an integral part of the Theosophical Seal, they will be the subject of special studies. The form of the cross with which the Christian world is most familiar is the Latin cross, F, in which the lower section is twice the length of the upper section or the arms. A, religious symbol. The cross, in the minds of most of us, is associated with the Christian religion. Nevertheless, history has proven that it was not originally a Christian symbol. Carvings upon rocks and walls of caves are evidence that as a religious symbol it is vastly older than Christianity. We may correctly assume, therefore, that Christianity appropriated the cross and made it her own particular symbol. That is to say, the idea of the cross as a Christian symbol of hope and victory had its origins ages before the crucifixion of Jesus. We say this, not in any sense of irreverence, but with a deep conviction that due to the essential nature of the cross, the death of the Christos, following the pattern of the divine sacrifice throughout all ages, could only have taken place upon a cross. For Christianity was given to mankind as the latest in the line of mystery religions, a fact lost sight of after the disappearance of the Gnosis. Like all mystery religions, she veiled her truths under the guise of allegory and symbol. That men have mistaken the symbol for the reality is the greatest tragedy of the age. We may truly say that Christianity dramatized, historically in the life of Jesus, and continuously through her rituals, the great cosmic or universal truths which are embodied in the symbol of the cross. For the critic to deny the historic reality of the Christian drama and its dramatis personae because he learns that it fits into the mold of a universal or cosmic pattern is as illogical as it would be for the scientist, beholding in the atom under his microscope a miniature solar universe, and to deny the existence of that atom on the grounds that it copies the larger pattern. Indeed, of no other religion upon our planet, at least in the memory of man, Can it be said that it presents its philosophy and its theology? I use this word in a universal sense in the pattern of a divine or sacred drama, a pattern which loses nothing of truth or uniqueness, because it is a replica in time of that drama of creation whereby worlds and all living forms come into being. However, the descent of spirit into manifestation, the incarnation or the Word made flesh, these words express only half the story of the cross. We have suggested that the cross is a dual symbol. It represents God descending to earth. The divine sacrifice, it also represents man ascending to God, the eternal resurrection, so the other half of the story of the cross pictures the way of the return. The way of the cross is not only the way to Calvary. It is the way whereby the Spirit Son of God, having descended to earth to become man, through definite stages or initiations, expansions of consciousness, ascends again to become divine. This is the heart of every true religion. Christianity has dramatized this in the life of Jesus. We might truly say it is her complete and only story. We only have to look into the world about us to see how the hieroglyph of the cross types nature in so many of her phases. The earth rotating upon its axis divides the day into 4 quarters, and the sun rising in the east, crossing the meridian, and setting in the west, forms what we might call the mundane cross, its arms extending outward in time and space. Again, the rotation of the earth around the sun, passing as it does through the 12 signs of the zodiac, draws a circle or ecliptic within which is inscribed another cross. The horizontal line of this cross extends from Aries to Libra, its vertical line from Cancer to Capricorn, into unthinkable distances, and they form in the heavens the sidereal or celestial cross. Combine with this the annual motion of the earth by the inclination of its axis, forming the 12 months and 4 seasons of the solar year, and we have what might be called the cosmic cross extending outward in time as well as space. We may trace a series of correspondences between the mundane and the cosmic crosses. For instance, the 2 times 12 hours of the day and the 12 months of the year, the 4 quarters of the day and the 4 seasons of the year find many close relationships: morning and springtime, noonday and summer, afternoon and autumn, midnight and winter. Poets often have related the ages of man with the quarters of the day and the seasons of the year: youth with morning and spring, maturity with noontime and summer, middle age with afternoon and autumn, old age with midnight and winter. Like many of the older religions, Christianity has not hesitated to fit the critical points of its drama upon this cosmic cross. At the winter solstice, the sun reaches his most southern point. He stands still. Darkness covers the land and grips it in its icy hand. Fear and hopelessness paralyze the primitive mind. The sun is dead, and with his death all life has departed from the earth. After 3 days, December 25th, he begins his northward journey. He is reborn. Then, as he rises again into the heavens, the whole earth begins to respond to his life-giving rays. At the spring equinox, he crosses the earth's equator and days and nights are equal, and at the summer solstice he reaches his most northerly point, hesitates for a moment to begin to retrace his path southward. At the autumnal equinox he gathers in the harvest and prepares again for his death and burial. The religions of all peoples, from the most primitive to our own, have fixed these cardinal points of the solar cross as the times of their most sacred festivals. And should we be surprised to learn that Christianity has chosen the points from which start the vertical and the horizontal lines of the solar cross in setting the dates of its 2 major festivals, Christmas and Easter? It is said that Plato, contemplating this solar cross, exclaimed, "The world's soul is crucified." The cross and the crucifix. When one thinks of the cross, particularly the Latin cross, he thinks instinctively of Christianity, so closely identified are they in the public mind. And yet it is a matter of historical record that in the early centuries of the Christian Church, the cross was not universally its symbol, and did not become so until the 4th century when, under the decree of the Emperor Constantine, it became the official symbol of the Church. According to legend, it was on the eve of the great battle, which was to decide the fate of the Roman Empire in the West, that there appeared in the heavens a flaming cross and above it the words, "In hoc signo vinces." The following day Constantine's army was victorious, and believing that the God of the Christians was on his side, he became a champion of the new religion and established the cross as its official emblem. The crucifix, however, now universally used by the Roman branch of the Church, did not appear until 3 centuries later. Relics from the early churches and from the catacombs reveal a Latin cross without a figure upon it. The following is quoted from Gerald Massey's The Natural Genesis. The value of the cross as a Christian symbol is supposed to date from the time when Jesus was crucified, and yet in the Christian iconography of the catacombs no figure of a man appears upon the cross during the first 6 or 7 centuries. They're all forms of the cross except the crucifix, the alleged starting point of the new religion. During some 6 centuries after the Christian era, the foundation of the Christian religion in a crucified Redeemer, is entirely absent from Christian art. The earliest known form of the human figure on the cross is a crucifix presented by Pope Gregory the Great to the Queen of Lombardy, whilst no image of the crucified is found in the catacombs of Rome earlier than the 7th or 8th century. There is no Christ and no crucified. The cross is the Christ. The cross, not the crucified, is the primary symbol of the Christian Church. The cross, not the crucified, is the essential object of representation in its art and of adoration in its religion. And that cross is pre-Christian, is pagan and heathen in half a dozen different shapes. During these centuries, the cross stood for the Christ and was addressed as if it were a living being. It was divinized at first and humanized at last. Yet for 13 centuries the crucifix has held, and still holds a sacred place in the hearts of millions of devotees to whom it is a revered symbol of the Christian faith. What does this imply? We recall that the gnosis disappeared from the Church about the same time that the crucifix replaced the plain cross. We must assume that as the Christian teaching began to appeal more and more to the masses of the people, the esoteric or mystery teachings were gradually lost sight of by the Church Fathers and emphasis was more and more placed on the historical and materialistic aspect. The crucifix fulfilled this new emphasis in that it appealed to the emotional part of man rather than to the intellectual. The crucifix graphically keeps before the mind the dramatic rather than the philosophic aspect of the cross. Two questions come to our minds. If it is true that Christianity presents its religious truths through the life story of Jesus in the form of a divine drama, should not the cross with the corpus affixed be considered its true symbol? On the other hand, may we not assume that, when the day comes when the gnosis or the inner mysteries will be restored to their rightful place in the Christian teachings, the plain or Latin cross will return as the Church's rightful symbol? The answers to these questions may lie in the thought that the Christian drama itself is the symbol of a universal or cosmic drama whereby, through the eternal sacrifice of God, the universe and all living things come into being. These questions bring to mind a most interesting experiment made a number of years ago by a group of investigators under the guidance of Mr. C.W. Leadbeater. Whoever has read any of Mr. Leadbeater's many books on the subject of the ancient wisdom and of Christianity will know of his accomplishments as a seer and occultist, and of his numerous contributions to a deeper understanding of the many truths concealed within its sacred scriptures. They will know, too, that during many years, perhaps many lives, through determined and persistent effort he had developed certain inner or psychic faculties enabling him to extend his consciousness backward in time to contact ideas and events long since past. Pondering upon the relative significance of the cross and the crucifix in Christian symbology, this group determined to learn which of these two held first place in the realm of causations. It is said that Mr. Leadbeater had expected to find the figure disappear, leaving only the plain cross. However, and to his great astonishment, the cross itself faded away, leaving the figure of a god with arms outstretched, not in agony of dying but in blessing. Yet a little thought will convince us that in the ultimate the cross is the symbol, and man, son of heaven and earth, is the reality. However, before the eyes are able to behold that reality in its completeness, they must look, as through a glass, upon the symbol. When man emerges from the darkness of ignorance into the light of wisdom, and his eyes become accustomed to the reality rather than the shadow, the symbol fades and he alone remains. It is by no means unnatural, writes C.W. Leadbeater, that the descent of the divine man into matter should be symbolized by the binding of the body to the cross. Sign of the cross. Any study of the cross would be incomplete without considering its purpose and value as a sign of devotion and prayer so universally used by millions of worshippers throughout the Christian world. We have been thinking of the cross as a symbol made of wood, stone, or metal, printed or carved, that is, as something fixed and inanimate. We wish now to consider it as an action or movement made by the hand over the self or over another person or over another activity. Made over the self, this sign signifies an act of blessing or a prayer for help and protection in some difficulty. When made over another person, it is supposed to invoke protection or healing. In certain religious rites, such as baptism, confirmation, unction, etc., it is used over another person to invoke divine forgiveness, purification, stimulation, or some definite intent in the mind of the officiant. When the sign is made over certain objects, particularly in the performance of liturgical acts, it is considered to impress upon such objects certain benevolent influences, or to bring upon the possessor protection or good fortune. Here we leave the plane of philosophy and enter the realm of the occult. We are forced to recognize either one of two points of view. This act of making the sign of the cross is purely a carryover from a past superstition, and its effect upon us is merely psychological, or there are certain mental or spiritual forces engendered or released through the performance of this action, not otherwise present in ordinary movements of the hands. In other words, is the sign of the cross a religious gesture as an act of recollection or belief, or is it an act of magic quite outside the realm of normal experience? We have been looking upon the cross objectively as something outside of ourselves. We now consider it subjectively as a power or force within oneself capable of accomplishing certain objective results. The attitude of the Christian world is divided upon this subject. There are those who feel that all ritualism is useless and valueless, and that man's contact with God is to be found directly through his own heart. On the other hand, there are those who feel that the way to God and the claim upon his blessing is more readily realized through orderly and cooperative rituals. The purpose and value of ritualism in religious worship is a subject that cannot be discussed at this point. The obvious intent of ceremonialism is to still the mind and the emotions that they may become attuned and therefore receptive to spiritual influences. If, as we may suppose, the efficacy of this gesture is enhanced by the intent and the earnestness of the one who makes it, we may rightly wonder if without such strong intent the value of the action diminishes to a vanishing point. In other words, is there virtue in the action itself apart from the will or desire of the one who performs the action? We shall consider this problem from as impartial and unprejudiced a point of view as we can. In the first place, we feel that the millions who make the sign of the cross neither know nor suspect a modus operandi behind their action. The thing is done with the spontaneous automatism of breathing. The gesture is associated vaguely, especially if accompanied with a prayer formula or rubric, with the Trinity. Our approach to an understanding of the problem must be predicated by an assumption that behind this act there is a sincerity of intent and a reverent devotion on the part of the worshipper. In his mind there exists, consciously or unconsciously, a certain idea, which, repeated again and again, becomes for him a miniature creed. We look to the fundamental philosophy behind the lines which comprise the cross. The vertical line represents God the Father, not in a far-off heaven, but descending to earth. It is the life principle or spirit impregnating matter. It is God incarnate as the Son, the Word made flesh. The horizontal line represents the matter of the universe, Latin mater, the mother, as the receptive or generative aspect of deity. The union of these two lines is the sign of man, who in his spiritual nature is the Son of God, while in his form aspect is the Son of earth. Thus the vertical line descends and crosses the horizontal line, and an infinite soul enters a finite body. In the movement of the hand upward, touching the left shoulder and the right, the Son of Man rises again into his spiritual estate as Son of God. Of course, the one who makes this sign over himself thinks of none of these things. He thinks of God as Father sending down his blessing on behalf of his Son, who having descended to earth gave himself as the sacrifice whereby we may also rise with him to glory. These and kindred thoughts are packed together in this sign as a kind of miniature creed. There is also the idea of being linked with God or with our own higher self, the sign itself being the sign of union or addition, as exemplified in the mathematical plus. Usually the sign is made, whether over the self or another, together with repetition of the words of power. We say, audibly or silently, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. In the association of the gesture with the words of this mantram lies the key to its power. And a study of the correspondences implied gives us an understanding of the validity of its source and the method of its operation. Indeed, it might be said without exaggeration that an understanding of the correspondences between God and nature and between God and man is the ABC of occult wisdom. Briefly stated, the head, typifying the seat of the intelligence or will, is related to the Father aspect of God, the divine will. The physical heart is the seat of man's purest love and is therefore associated with the love aspect of God, or the Son. Universally, the heart is the symbol of love. Similarly, the arms and shoulders, alluding to man in his manifold activities, types God in his activity or creative aspect, known in Christian terminology as the Holy Ghost. When therefore, while touching the forehead with the fingers of the right hand, we say, in the name of the Father, then bringing the hand to the heart, or the solar plexus, we say, and of the Son, then finally touching the left and right shoulders, we conclude with, and of the Holy Ghost. There is created an interlocking mechanism whereby, through the similitude of his own threefold spiritual nature, man invokes the threefold power of God. We think of a key which opens a lock by the exactness of its corresponding contours, for man's spirit is the very image of God, whose will, love, wisdom, and creative activity find their corresponding image and likeness, reflected in his own personal nature, putting in his hands the key wherewith he may unlock the infinite. Evidence that the sign of the cross is more than Christian may be found in two quotations from H.P. Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine. She writes, "Long before the cross or its sign were adopted as symbols of Christianity, The sign of the cross was used as a mark of recognition among adepts and neophytes, the latter being called crests from Crestos. She then quotes Eliphas Levi, the French Kabbalist, as saying that initiates into that order use the sign thus. Carrying his hand to his forehead, said, "To thee," then he added, "belong," and continued, carrying the hand to the breast, the kingdom then to the left shoulder, justice to the right shoulder, and mercy then he joined the two hands, adding throughout the generating cycles. In the same volume, page 588, speaking of the Tau cross, she refers to the use of the sign of the cross made by the prophet Ezekiel over the men of Judah who feared the Lord. Ezekiel 9:4. The Lord said, "Go through the city Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof." In the Vulgate Bible, this mark was translated Signum Thau, sign of the Egyptian cross. Finally, may we express a few thoughts on the rationale of this action and suggest some answers to the questions what, whence, and how. I say suggest, for who can really know, much less describe, the true nature of the reality behind phenomena? First, there is the power of tradition. Tradition, whether we are aware of it or not, exerts an influence upon our lives. Long-continued and oft-repeated thoughts have their effect upon the mental atmosphere about us. We have only to enter the quiet hall of an old college to feel our own thoughts stirred by the profundity of wisdom that seems to exude from its very walls. Who has strolled through the silent corridors of an ancient cathedral and has not come under the spell of an influence which automatically turns his thoughts to meditation and his heart to prayer? In much the same way, though perhaps infinitely more subtle, may we conceive a kind of psychic or spiritual reservoir built up and sustained by countless millions of acts of devotion and worship over the centuries. Such a reservoir of spiritual power is, we are assured by occultists, a very real thing. Through the laws of affinity and attraction, every fervent prayer and sincere aspiration, accompanied by this traditional sign of the cross, reaches up to tap this reservoir of spiritual and mental power. Since the fundamental idea of the cross is spirit descending into matter, it is therefore the sign of the Incarnation and is particularly associated with the Son aspect of God. If we follow this logic from the highest spiritual level down to earth, we may realize that, aside from historical association of Jesus and the cross, there is this timeless association of the cross with the universal Christ, who is the very embodiment of the Son aspect of God upon our planet. When therefore the Christian Church, through its rituals and symbols, uses the sign of the cross, it is thereby both expressing and recollecting this ancient and inner linkage with its true spiritual head. For if it is granted that spiritual values have a place in the world and throughout the universe, we must admit the rationality and the reality of this power of the cross. It may rightly be claimed, therefore, that the cross is the Christ's own particular sign, and that as Lord of wisdom as well as of love, his consciousness is ever aware of each occasion when it is made with true sincerity and devotion. The sign therefore becomes a key to unlock his own great reservoir of spiritual power. Indeed, it puts one in temporary rapport with him and exerts a claim upon his blessing. It is a silent invocation which becomes both an instrument and a channel for the calling down and the distribution of this Christ force. It may be said, in all reverence, that he who with true sincerity makes this sign over another person or over an object does so in the momentary capacity as his representative. Again, students of the occult anatomy of man know that man's body is surrounded and interpenetrated by an etheric counterpart or double, which acts as the medium of contact and assimilation of the invisible and spiritual forces. They know too that in this etheric double there exist certain chakras or force centers, one at the top of the head, one at the brow, one at the throat, one at the heart, etc. These chakras differentiate this force to the particular function of the ductless glands as the physical recipient and agent of its use in the body. When therefore an officiant or ordained priest makes the sign of the cross over the head, the brow, the throat, and the heart, as in baptism, confirmation, unction, etc., he is thereby exercising a particular impetus to the specific type of force represented by that center. How may one measure the power of the cross or enter into the heart of its mystery? Shall we say that if its essential significance is sacrifice, its meaning is limitation, loss, death? In this word is implied something infinitely more. Surely when we unite these two Latin words, sacrificio, make sacred, we are therein asserting that the very life of God comes down to man in order that it may thereby lift man up to God.
Thanks for watching the Wisdom Rocker. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.